the National Coronavirus Command Council reportedly set to meet today to discuss COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. So the meeting will focus on the national state of disaster, which expires tomorrow following numerous extensions. There have also been growing calls for the legislation to be lifted, with some health experts saying the measures are now obsolete. So let's discuss this now with Dr. Joe Barnes from the Stellenbosch University Global Health Department. Dr. Barnes, thanks very much indeed for your time this morning. So the South African government initially, when implementing the national state of disaster, said that decisions would be made based on science and based on the available evidence. One gets the feeling that that's no longer the case. What's your reading of the situation?
Good morning, and good morning to our viewers. Yes, they did promise us that, but they were curiously and of concern, very, very reluctant to share that information. And without that information, without transparency, there can be no accountability. So we don't actually know what pieces of advice from the Ministerial Advisory Council or Committee they took, what they didn't take, and why. There were calls via the PI Act for them to provide that evidence, but they took between 68 and 111 days to provide that, by which time we were already into the next wave. So there's very little to be learned from that, and I am getting increasingly concerned that they are misusing the Disaster Management Act for what can be tactfully called executive overreach.
Dr. Barnes, there's a recent research article published by the South African Medical Journal. That study, the authors in that study, we're told, had to wait between 68 and 111 days to see what advice was contained in the Ministerial Advisory Committee's reports to government. Why would that delay happen? Why is the information not more readily available?
I wish I could answer you with a great amount of authority. All I can tell you is that there are probably a few reasons, not one, and none of them are particularly reassuring. One of the first things that spring to mind is, so what have they got to hide? Why are they doing this? Why are they refusing to justify their decisions? Another problem is the fact that it's so extremely difficult to get the real decision makers to change anything that it seems as if saving face is more important to them than limiting damage to the country and to the population. That's another reason for concern. So this decision-making approach and this command council, we do not actually know who actually, all of the members of the council have not been made known even to this day. So some are cabinet ministers, so they wear more than one hat when they make decisions. Others are unknown. So these significant delays and lack of information has actually caused a gap in knowledge that caused misinformation and fake news to flourish.
Yeah, and those are the real-world implications of this information not being readily available. As you say, misinformation takes root. There's a lot of fake news doing the rounds. And, of course, insofar as the response by hospitals is concerned from one wave to the next, that information only becomes available once that wave is already done and hospitals are facing new challenges in a new wave.
You know, I'm concerned for even the wider implications of this. The same organization, the government, who banished or forbid anybody to buy short-sleeve T-shirts, and you could only buy raw food, and you can't leave your home to go and search for firewood to cook it. That all those irrational rules and laws really created a significant lack of trust in the government. It's now the same government that's urging people to get vaccinated. And there's such a huge break in trust that they're simply not taking up the invitation in sufficient numbers for us to feel safe.
If this national state of disaster is lifted, it expires tomorrow. If the decision is made that it won't be renewed, is the health department, Dr. Barnes, ready to take over the administration of this leg of the pandemic?
It seems not. It seems as if they have now managed to run a political control over this pandemic, and they have not yet prepared any exit strategy. They keep on buying time, and every time they give us a reason, the reason looks weaker and less convincing. And this one is now that they're not yet ready to with all the legislation needed for the Department of Health to do its mandate, and that is, amongst other actions, to control and manage and administer the necessary for coping with an outbreak. So what legislation is this that they need to prepare? They don't say. We don't know.
Yeah. So Dr. Barnes, if indeed, I mean, depending on which way these discussions go with the National Coronavirus Command Council, in your opinion, at this stage of the pandemic, are we ready to go ahead to proceed without any regulations in place?
You know, when they transfer the control or the management of this outbreak to the Department of Health, that doesn't mean that anything needs to lapse. It's not as if the Department of Health cannot issue control regulations that everybody has to obey. So it's not as if transferring this to the government department mandated to do this job, that everything will now fall to the ground and that they now have to rebuild it. There is no such an issue. So it doesn't, the Department of Health managed the listeriosis outbreak without any interference from the presidency. So it doesn't seem convincing to me that it all now hinges on administrative regulations and rules that need to be adapted. What are they, and why have they not started earlier if this is now such a long process?
Yeah.
I'm asking the question rhetorically because none of us outside of the charmed circle actually know.
Certainly. Globally, in terms of how other countries have managed this stage of the pandemic, how do we fare insofar as that management is concerned?
Look, this is a wily enemy, and you never know in a month and a half's time whether it would pitch up with pink tackies on, and then we would have to go right back to where we were. But there's nothing stopping us from then reinstating what we had. Other countries have opened up because they realize that the massive economic damage also has health implications, and hunger has increased, and job losses, and the massive damage to the economy was not sustainable anymore. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do the sensible precautions of keeping a distance and keeping your face covered and washing your hands. That hardly costs anything. It's irritating, but truly it is not a massive invasion of any lifestyle.
Yeah, and certainly
it's all the other things that are so hard to understand, and I'm worried that since we don't know why, there is no accountability for the decisions that they make.
Yeah, certainly the measures that you talk about there, Dr. Barnes, life-saving as we've found them to be over the course of the pandemic. Dr. Joe Barnes is from Stellenbosch University's Global Health Department, joining us there as we continue to track the story around the National Coronavirus Command Council meeting at some point today. We're set to get an update on lockdown restrictions as well.